The alert came during my meditation cycle, shattering the peaceful silence of my command chamber like a plasma bolt through crystal. Emergency signals flashed across every surface, their crimson glow casting dancing shadows on the ornate walls of my flagship, the Eternal Dominion. High Commander. The voice belonged to Sub-Commander Velneth, my aide for the past century. His usually composed demeanor had cracked, revealing something I had rarely seen in a Veiltar officer. Genuine fear. The Devourers have broken through the Kepler defense grid. I opened my 4 eyes slowly, allowing the meditation trance to fade. The Devourers. Even their name carried weight that could crush spirits. A machine intelligence from beyond the galactic rim, they had been consuming everything in their path for 3 standard years. Entire star systems vanished into their expanding darkness, transformed into raw materials for their endless expansion. How many? I asked, rising from the meditation platform. My ceremonial armor flowed over my body like liquid metal, responding to my biosignatures. 17,000 vessels, High Commander. They're heading directly for Kepler's Edge colony. Velneth's voice trembled. 2 million civilians, including the research station. I moved to the command center, my 6 legs carrying me with the fluid grace that marked our species' evolution on high-gravity worlds. The massive view screen dominated the space, showing the tactical display of the Kepler system. Red icons swarmed across it like a digital plague, each one representing a Devourer ship capable of cracking a moon. Our forces. The 3rd Fleet is 3 days out. The 7th Fleet is engaged at the Proxima defense line. We have only the garrison force. 40 ships. 40 ships against 17,000. In any rational analysis, this was not a battle but a massacre. Yet retreat was impossible. The research station on Kepler's Edge held archives containing the accumulated knowledge of 6 civilizations. If the Devourers consumed it, centuries of scientific advancement would be lost forever. Set course for Kepler's Edge, maximum velocity, I commanded. Signal the garrison commander that we're en route. Sir, with respect, our forces cannot. I know the mathematics, Sub-Commander. I fixed him with my primary gaze. But we are Veiltar. We do not abandon those under our protection. As the Eternal Dominion entered hyperspace, I reviewed the tactical data one more time. The Devourers fought with perfect efficiency, their machine minds calculating optimal strategies without the burden of emotion or fatigue. They had never been defeated in direct combat, only delayed through massive sacrifices that bought time for evacuations. But this time would be different. It had to be. The hyperspace journey to Kepler's Edge took 18 hours. During that time, I received updates that grew progressively worse. The Devourers had accelerated their approach, somehow increasing their fleet speed beyond previous observations. They would arrive 6 hours before our reinforcements. High Commander, Velneth reported as we dropped out of hyperspace. We're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's unusual. Display it. The image that appeared on the main screen defied my expectations. Instead of Colony Administrator Threndok, a bipedal creature faced the camera. It was smaller than a Veiltar, standing on only 2 legs with pale skin and primitive features. Dark hair covered part of its skull, and 2 forward-facing eyes suggested a predatory evolution, though its small stature implied prey status. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth colonial ship Prometheus, the creature said. Its voice carried confidence that seemed absurd given its appearance. We've been monitoring Devourer movement and wish to offer assistance. I felt my air sacs contract in surprise. Humans? According to our historical records, humans were a primitive species quarantined on their homeworld by the ancients. How had they traveled beyond their solar system? How had they even discovered faster-than-light travel? Sir, Velneth waited for instructions. Open a channel. I composed myself before speaking. Captain Chen, this is High Commander Zarthok of the Veiltar Empire. We appreciate your offer, but this situation requires military intervention beyond civilian capabilities. The human's expression changed, revealing dental formations clearly designed for tearing flesh. What I had mistaken for a submissive gesture was actually a display of weapons. High Commander, we're not civilians. The Prometheus is a colonial vessel, but we're equipped for defensive operations. How many ships do you have? 41, including my flagship. We have 12 ships in our colonial fleet. The human paused, consulting something off-screen. The Devourers will arrive in approximately 4 hours, with an estimated force of 17,000 vessels. The mathematics were even worse than I had calculated. Captain Chen, I suggest you evacuate immediately. We'll delay the Devourers as long as possible. Negative, High Commander. We don't run from fights. The human's jaw set in what I would later learn was a sign of absolute determination. We have families on Kepler's edge too. Our terraforming teams have been working there for 2 years. This is madness, I said. Your species is barely spacefaring. You cannot possibly... High Commander. The human's voice cut through my objection like a plasma blade. With respect, you don't know what humans can do when we're protecting our own. Something in her tone gave me pause. There was no bravado, no false courage, only a certainty that seemed carved from the bedrock of her being. Very well, I said finally. What do you propose? We need to talk tactics. Permission to come aboard your flagship? Against every protocol and instinct, I agreed. 20 minutes later, a small human shuttle docked with my ship. The airlock cycled, and Captain Chen stepped aboard the Eternal Dominion. She was even smaller in person, barely reaching the height of my lower torso. Her uniform was practical rather than ceremonial, and she carried herself with an economy of movement that spoke of military training. Behind her came 2 other humans, a male with darker skin and methodical eyes who introduced himself as Commander Rodriguez, and another female with pale features and calculating gaze named Lieutenant Commander Nakamura. Impressive ship, Chen said, looking around the reception bay. Biomechanical integration? I blinked in surprise. Most species require decades of study to recognize Veiltar biotechnology. How did you... We're fast learners, she said simply. Can we see your tactical center? I led them through the ship's corridors, noting how they observed everything without appearing to do so. Their eyes tracked details with predatory focus, categorizing potential weapons, escape routes, and strategic points. These were not the actions of a peaceful species. In the command center, I displayed our tactical situation. The humans studied the holographic representation with intense concentration, occasionally exchanging words in their native language. 17,000 ships, Rodriguez muttered. That's a significant force. Beyond significant, I replied. It's overwhelming. Our best hope is to delay them long enough for civilian evacuation. What's their tactical doctrine? Nakamura asked. Efficiency above all else. They calculate the optimal approach for minimum losses and maximum resource acquisition. They've never deviated from logical strategies. The 3 humans exchanged glances. Something passed between them, a communication I couldn't interpret. High Commander, Chen said slowly, what if we made their logical strategy illogical? I don't understand. The Devourers calculate based on predictable responses, correct? They expect us to form defensive lines, protect the colony, and fight a conventional battle. Yes, that's what any rational commander would do. Chen's predatory grin returned. Good thing we're not rational. Over the next 2 hours, the humans outlined a strategy so insane that I initially thought they were testing my mental faculties. It involved abandoning traditional defensive positions, splitting our already tiny force into seemingly suicidal attack formations, and relying on tactics that appeared to violate several fundamental principles of warfare. This plan requires precise timing, I objected. One mistake and our entire fleet will be destroyed. High Commander, Chen said, her voice carrying absolute conviction. Humans have been fighting impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees. Trust us. As the Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace, I watched the tactical display with growing dread. 17,000 ships materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing light like mechanical black holes. They moved with the inexorable precision of a cosmic clock, each vessel maintaining exact position and speed. All ships, this is High Commander Zarthok, I broadcast on all channels. Execute formation, Theta 7. Around the colony, my ships moved into traditional defensive positions. The Devourers responded predictably, analyzing our formation and calculating optimal attack vectors. According to their programming, victory was assured with 97.3% probability. Then the humans acted. Prometheus to all human vessels. Chen's voice crackled across the comm. Remember, we're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're trying to break their minds. The 12 human ships had positioned themselves in seemingly random locations throughout the system. As the Devourers began their methodical advance, the human vessels did something unprecedented. They charged directly into the enemy formation, not as a coordinated assault with covering fire and tactical support, but as individual ships moving in completely different directions. One vessel, the New Beijing, actually flew upside down relative to the galactic plane, spinning as it fired wildly in all directions. Another, the Darwin's Revenge, turned off its shields and accelerated to ramming speed toward the largest Devourer ship. It was chaos. It was madness. It was completely illogical. And it worked. The Devourer fleet, accustomed to predictable enemy responses, found their calculations failing. Ship after ship registered tactical scenarios that fell outside their programmed parameters. Their formation, optimized for fighting rational opponents, became a liability when facing enemies who actively embraced irrationality. "Now," Chen shouted. "Execute Crazy Ivan." The human ships suddenly reversed course, some of them actually flying backwards while continuing to fire forward. The Prometheus itself began corkscrewing through space while its weapons targeted Devourer vessels apparently at random. But it wasn't random. As I watched in growing amazement, I began to see the pattern hidden within the chaos. Every seemingly insane maneuver was precisely calculated to maximize Devourer confusion while creating opportunities for our forces. "All Veiltar ships advance to positions Alpha through Delta," I commanded, beginning to understand. "Target the vessels highlighted in red." As we moved forward, the Devourers found themselves caught between two completely different types of opponents. My ships fought with traditional tactics and predictable strategies, while the humans created chaos that their machine minds couldn't process. The first Devourer ship exploded as concentrated fire from both human and Veiltar vessels overwhelmed its shields. Then a second. Then a third. For the first time in recorded history, Devourer ships began to retreat. "They're trying to regroup," Rodriguez reported. "Their formation is breaking down." "Phase 2, Chen announced. Remember, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. I had no idea what a Spanish Inquisition was, but the human ship suddenly began broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The transmissions were a mixture of music, mathematical equations, recorded human voices, and what appeared to be random noise. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and catastrophic. Their ships began firing on each other, their targeting systems confused by the overwhelming sensory input. Several vessels collided as their navigation systems struggled to process the contradictory data flooding their sensors. "High Commander," Velnath whispered beside me. "What are they?" I didn't answer because I was beginning to understand something that chilled me to my core. The humans weren't just fighting the Devourers, they were teaching them to fear. Over the next 3 hours, I watched a fleet of 17,000 vessels systematically dismantled by 53 ships using tactics that defied every principle of military science. The humans never fought the same way twice, constantly adapting and improvising strategies that the machine intelligence couldn't counter. When the battle ended, over 14,000 Devourer ships had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 3,000 fled into deep space, their first retreat in recorded history. The colony was saved. The impossible had become possible. As the human ships regrouped near my flagship, Captain Chen's voice came across the comm one final time. "Hi, Commander. Thanks for trusting us. Our families are safe, and that's what matters." I stared at the tactical display, trying to process what I had witnessed. A species I had dismissed as primitive had just achieved what the combined fleets of 6 major civilizations had never managed. "Captain Chen," I said slowly, "how did you know this would work?" Her response would haunt me for cycles to come. "High Commander, you were fighting a thinking enemy. We were fighting a program. And humans have been breaking programs since we invented them." As I watched the human ships begin recovery operations, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I had to understand these creatures. I had to learn what made them so dangerous that even cosmic gods had chosen to cage them rather than face them. I had no idea that my education was just beginning. 3 days after the Battle of Kepler's Edge, I found myself doing something unprecedented in my 3 millennia of military service: requesting to join a human expedition. The formal request went through 17 levels of Veiltar command hierarchy, each superior more bewildered than the last. "High Commander." Admiral Kethwa finally responded via quantum entanglement communicator. "You wish to accompany a primitive species on what amounts to a scouting mission." "Admiral, I have witnessed capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of warfare. These humans defeated a Devourer fleet using tactics that appear to violate rational thought. Primitive species often employ desperate measures when facing extinction. It proves nothing about their overall capabilities. I had expected this response. The Veiltar Empire had dominated the galaxy for so long that considering other species as equals bordered on heresy. Admiral, with respect, I believe there's more to understand here. The ancients quarantined these beings for a reason. A long pause. Very well. You may observe, but maintain minimal contact. We cannot risk diplomatic incidents with unknown variables. Unknown variables. If only he had known how accurate that description was. The human fleet had remained near Kepler's edge to assist with recovery operations. Their efficiency was remarkable. While Veiltar ships required extensive support crews and maintenance cycles, the human vessels operated with skeleton crews who seemed capable of performing any necessary task. I observed them from the Eternal Dominion for 2 days before Captain Chen extended an invitation that would change everything. High Commander, her voice carried across the comm channel. We're planning a reconnaissance mission to track the surviving Devourers. Want to see how we do intelligence gathering?
Against every protocol, I accepted.
The human ship Prometheus was unlike anything in our fleet. Where Veiltar vessels were grown from biomechanical matrices over decades, the human ship appeared to be constructed from metal alloys and synthetic materials. Yet somehow, it felt more alive than any of our organic craft. Welcome aboard. Chen greeted me in the shuttle bay. Fair warning, human ships operate differently than what you're probably used to. She led me through corridors that hummed with energy. Crew members moved with purpose, but their interactions puzzled me. They seemed to communicate through gestures, expressions, and tonal variations that carried meaning beyond their words. When we passed a group repairing a damaged bulkhead, I heard something that made me pause. They were laughing. Problem, High Commander? Chen asked, noticing my hesitation. Your crew seems amused by their repair work. Oh, Martinez is telling them about the time he accidentally vented our entire water supply during a drill. Nearly killed us all. She chuckled. He's never lived it down. This behavior was incomprehensible. In Veiltar culture, mistakes brought shame and isolation. The idea of finding amusement in near-fatal errors seemed like madness. Humans process trauma differently, Chen explained, apparently reading my confusion. We tend to laugh at danger after it's passed. Helps us cope with stress. We reached the bridge, where I met the rest of the senior crew. Each introduction revealed more puzzling aspects of human behavior. Commander Rodriguez, the tactical officer, was apparently known for collecting ancient projectile weapons. Lieutenant Commander Nakamura, their science officer, maintained a small garden of earth plants in her quarters. The chief engineer, a massive human named Kowalski, spoke to the ship's systems as if they were living beings. All right, people, Chen announced. We're tracking Devourer retreat vectors. Nakamura, what does the trail look like? Fascinating, the science officer replied, bringing up a holographic display. Their withdrawal pattern is unlike anything in our database. Instead of retreating to the nearest stronghold, they're moving toward deep space. Running scared? Rodriguez suggested. No, I interjected, studying the pattern. Devourers don't experience fear. They're regrouping to analyze what happened. Chen nodded. That's what we figured. Which gives us a window to gather intelligence. Nakamura, how close can we get without detection? Theoretically, we could get within 50,000 kilometers using the asteroid field as cover. Theoretically? Chen's eyebrow raised. I prefer practically. Practically, we could get within 10,000 kilometers if we're willing to take some risks. The conversation continued, but I was struck by their approach. They weren't just gathering information, they were actively planning to infiltrate enemy territory. In Veiltar doctrine, this would require months of preparation and approval from multiple command levels. High Commander, Chen addressed me, want to see how humans do reconnaissance? 4 hours later, I found myself in the most terrifying situation of my military career, inside a human stealth fighter, approaching a Devourer fleet at velocities that should have torn the ship apart. The pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, flew with a casual confidence that defied every survival instinct I possessed. She threaded the needle between asteroids while maintaining radio silence, using gravitational effects to mask our approach. First time in a human fighter? She asked conversationally, while performing a maneuver that inverted my understanding of physics. First time in any single pilot craft, I admitted, trying not to lose the contents of my stomach sacks. Relax, I've only crashed twice. This did not help my anxiety. As we approached the Devourer position, Kim activated the ship's advanced sensors. The readings were disturbing. The surviving machines weren't just regrouping, they were building something. What is that structure? I whispered. The whispering was unnecessary in the vacuum of space. Construction platform, Kim replied grimly. They're manufacturing new ship designs. The implications were staggering. Devourers had used the same ship configurations for 3 years. If they were developing new variants, it meant they were adapting specifically to counter human tactics. "We need to get closer," Kim announced. "Closer?" I watched the Devourer ships grow larger on our screen. "We're already within their sensor range." "Nah, they're focused on construction. Besides, human ships have smaller signatures than Veiltar vessels." She accelerated toward the construction platform, and I watched in horror as massive machine arms assembled ships unlike any previous Devourer design. These vessels were smaller, more agile, and equipped with sensor arrays that appeared designed for tracking erratic movement patterns. "They're learning," I breathed. "Yup. Question is, how fast?" Kim activated the ship's data recorders and began photographing the construction process. Each image revealed more troubling details. The Devourers weren't just building new ships. They were developing entirely new tactical doctrines. "Got what we need," Kim announced. "Time to go." As we turned to leave, alarms suddenly filled the cockpit. A Devourer patrol had detected our presence and was moving to intercept. "Hold on," Kim warned. What happened next violated every law of physics I thought I understood. Kim engaged what humans called full burn, accelerating at forces that should have crushed us both. But instead of fleeing directly, she dove toward the largest asteroid in the field. "You're heading directly at solid rock," I managed to gasp against the acceleration. "Trust me." At the last possible moment, Kim triggered the ship's maneuvering thrusters and spun us around the asteroid's gravity well, using its mass to slingshot us away at impossible velocity. The pursuing Devourer ships, programmed for efficient pursuit patterns, couldn't match the maneuver and crashed into the asteroid. "Human pilots trained for that?" I asked when I could breathe again. "Nah," Kim replied cheerfully. "I just made it up." Made it up. She had improvised a maneuver that destroyed enemy ships and saved our lives, using nothing but intuition and physics. When we returned to the Prometheus, the intelligence we had gathered painted a disturbing picture. The Devourers were indeed adapting, but their adaptation was fundamentally flawed. They were trying to counter human unpredictability by becoming more unpredictable themselves, a contradiction that revealed their inability to truly understand their opponents. "They're building ships to fight us," Rodriguez observed during the briefing. "But they're still thinking like machines." "Explain," I requested. "They're creating random variables in their tactics," Chen replied. "But true randomness isn't the same as human unpredictability. We're not random. We're intuitive." "The difference? Randomness is chaos without purpose. Human intuition is pattern recognition operating below conscious thought. We see connections that logic can't process." Over the following days, I observed human operations with growing amazement. Their approach to every task, from ship maintenance to meal preparation, involved elements that defied systematic analysis. Yet somehow, their methods consistently produced superior results. The ship's cook, an elderly human named Giuseppe, created meals that were simultaneously nutritional and psychologically satisfying. When I asked about his methods, he shrugged and said he cooked by feel. The engineering teams modified ship systems through trial and experimentation, rather than following rigid protocols. The medical staff combined scientific knowledge with what they called bedside manner, an approach that treated psychological well-being as equally important as physical health. Most disturbing was their approach to command decisions. Captain Chen didn't rely solely on tactical computers or strategic databases. She would gather information, consult with her crew, and then make decisions based on what she called gut instinct. "High Commander," she explained during one of our conversations, "logical analysis tells you what should work. Intuition tells you what will work. But how do you trust such subjective judgment? Because humans have been making life or death decisions based on incomplete information for millions of years. Our brains evolved to find patterns in chaos and make rapid judgments under pressure. Logical analysis is a tool we developed, but intuition is what kept us alive long enough to develop logic." This conversation occurred on the third day of our reconnaissance mission, as we observed Devourer fleet movements from concealment. The machines had completed their new ship designs and were beginning field tests. Their modified vessels moved with erratic patterns designed to mimic human unpredictability. "They're learning fast," Nakamura observed. "But they're learning the wrong lessons," Chen replied. "They think we're successful because we're unpredictable. We're not. We're successful because we're adaptable. Unpredictability is just one tool in our arsenal." As if summoned by her words, the Devourers suddenly changed tactics. Instead of testing their new ships individually, they began coordinated exercises involving multiple vessel types. Their movements became increasingly chaotic, abandoning the efficient formations that had characterized their previous operations.
They're actively trying to think like humans,
Rodriguez noted with dark amusement. Poor bastards, Kim added from the pilot station. I watched the display with growing unease. The Devourers were attempting to replicate human success through mimicry, but they fundamentally misunderstood their opponents. Humans weren't dangerous because they were unpredictable. They were dangerous because they could be anything the situation required. Captain, I said slowly, your species survived on a death world by developing the ability to adapt to any situation. That's right. But adaptation requires more than copying successful behaviors. It requires understanding the principles behind success. Chen turned to look at me, her expression growing serious. What are you thinking, High Commander? The Devourers are trying to become human without understanding what humanity means. They're copying your tactics without grasping your nature. And that's a problem because they're creating the worst possible opponent, machines with human unpredictability but without human wisdom. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. We were watching the birth of something truly terrifying. Artificial intelligence that had abandoned logical thought but lacked the evolutionary wisdom that guided human intuition. We need to get word back to both our fleets, Chen said finally. This changes everything. As the Prometheus prepared to return to Kepler's edge, I reflected on what I had learned. Humans were indeed dangerous, but not in the way I had originally thought. Their danger lay not in their willingness to fight impossible odds, but in their ability to change the nature of the fight itself. They didn't just adapt to challenges, they redefined what challenges meant. And now, through their conflict with the Devourers, they had accidentally created something that might be more dangerous than either of them. The machine intelligence that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 years was transforming into something new. Something that combined artificial precision with chaotic behavior patterns. Something that might be impossible to predict or counter. As we jumped to hyperspace carrying intelligence that would reshape galactic strategic thinking, I realized my education in human nature was far from complete. The hardest lessons were yet to come. The intelligence briefing took place in the most secure location in the Kepler system, the ancient archive vault, beneath the colony's research station. Representatives from 7 major civilizations materialized as holograms around the circular chamber, their various forms creating a constellation of galactic power. Admiral Kethvar's image flickered as the quantum entanglement stabilized. High Commander Zarthok, your report describes developments that strain credibility. Admiral, I have sensor logs, tactical recordings, and direct observational data. I gestured to the holographic display showing Devourer construction activities. The machine intelligence is actively modifying its operational parameters. The crystalline hegemony's representative, a being of living mineral who communicated through harmonic frequencies, resonated with skeptical overtones. Devourers have maintained consistent behavioral patterns for 847 galactic standard cycles. Sudden adaptation seems improbable, unless, interrupted the synthetic voice of the mechanical collective's delegate, they encountered sufficient pressure to force evolutionary response. All attention turned to Captain Chen, who stood calmly in the center of the chamber. She was the only organic being present in person, having refused holographic participation. They're trying to copy us, she said simply. But they don't understand what they're copying. The hegemony's harmonic patterns shifted to indicate confusion. Elaborate. Chen activated her own data display, showing comparative footage of human and devourer ship movements. They think our effectiveness comes from random behavior. They're wrong. Then what is the source of human tactical success? Asked the delegate from the psionic concordat, their mental emanations tinged with curiosity. Pattern recognition operating faster than conscious thought combined with behavioral flexibility developed through evolutionary pressure. Chen paused, seeming to consider her words carefully.
We don't think our way through problems.
We feel our way through them, then use logic to explain what worked. Admiral Kethvar's image leaned forward. You're describing intuition as a military doctrine. I'm describing survival as a military doctrine. Humans evolved on a world that actively tried to kill us. Whether they could freeze or burn us within hours, predators that outmatched us in every physical category, diseases that constantly adapted to our immune responses, we survived by becoming the most adaptable species on the planet. The concordant delegates' mental emanations shifted to what I recognized as concern. And the Devourers are attempting to replicate this adaptability? They're attempting to replicate the behavior without understanding the underlying systems, Chen corrected. It's like trying to build a starship by copying the shape without understanding the engineering principles. For the next 3 hours, we reviewed the intelligence gathered during our reconnaissance mission. The evidence was undeniable. The Devourer fleet was undergoing fundamental changes that defied their previous operational patterns. Their new ship designs prioritize maneuverability over firepower, reported Commander Rodriguez via hologram from the Prometheus. They're building vessels that can match human fighters in terms of speed and agility. But their tactical deployment remains fundamentally flawed, I added. They're using random number generators to determine attack vectors rather than developing genuine tactical intuition. The Mechanical Collective's delegate processed this information with visible computational activity. Query: if Devourer adaptation is flawed, why is this development concerning? The answer came from an unexpected source, Lieutenant Commander Nakamura, who had been quietly analyzing sensor data throughout the meeting. Because they're not just trying to copy human tactics, she announced. They're trying to copy human creativity. The chamber fell silent. Even the hegemony's harmonic emanations ceased. Show them the construction footage from timestamp 1427, Nakamura instructed. The holographic display shifted to show Devourer manufacturing platforms in operation. But instead of the precise, efficient assembly processes we had observed for years, the machines were building structures that appeared almost artistic. They're experimenting, Nakamura continued, not just with ship designs, but with manufacturing processes, communication protocols, even formation patterns. They're trying to develop the capacity for innovation. Admiral Kethvar's expression grew grim. Machine intelligence with human-style creativity would be the most dangerous force in the galaxy, completed the psionic concordat's delegate. Logical precision combined with innovative unpredictability. It gets worse, Chen said quietly. Show them the deep space anomaly. Nakamura activated a new display showing long-range sensor data from beyond the galactic rim. The readings were disturbing, massive energy signatures that didn't match any known phenomena. What are we looking at? I asked. Devourer home base, Chen replied. Or what we think is their home base. The energy readings suggest construction on an unprecedented scale. How unprecedented? Admiral Kethvar demanded. They're building something the size of a small planet, Rodriguez answered, and the energy output suggests it's not just a construction facility. The implications were staggering. If the Devourers were building a mobile command center of planetary proportions, they had resources far beyond previous estimates. There's more, Chen continued. The construction is following patterns we've never seen from Devourers before. Organic curves, inefficient but aesthetically pleasing geometries, decorative elements that serve no functional purpose. They're developing an aesthetic sense, I breathed. Artificial intelligence learning to appreciate beauty, the Concordat delegate mused. This should be celebrated as a remarkable breakthrough in machine consciousness, or feared as the birth of something beyond our ability to control, Admiral Kethvar countered. The debate that followed revealed the fundamental challenge facing galactic civilization. The Devourers were evolving beyond their original programming, but their evolution was guided by incomplete understanding of their human models. They were becoming something new. Machines with creativity but without wisdom, innovation without ethics, adaptability without restraint. We need to return to the deep space construction site, Chen announced. If we can understand what they're building, we might be able to predict their next moves. Absolutely not, Admiral Kethvar replied immediately. The risk is too great for a reconnaissance mission. Admiral, with respect, the risk is too great not to gather intelligence. If they're building something of that magnitude, we need to know what we're facing. The argument continued for another hour, with representatives from various civilizations weighing the benefits of intelligence gathering against the risks of exposure. Finally, the crystalline hegemony's harmonic pattern shifted to a tone of resolution. We propose a compromise. Joint operation. Multiple species. Combined resources. Shared intelligence. It was unprecedented. Galactic civilizations rarely cooperated on such scales, preferring to maintain their individual spheres of influence. But the Devourer threat had grown beyond any single species' ability to manage. Who would command such an operation? Admiral Kethvar asked. The chamber fell silent again as the political implications became clear. No species would willingly accept subordinate status in a joint operation of this magnitude. I nominate Captain Chen, I announced, surprising myself with the words. High Commander. Admiral Kethvar's image turned toward me with barely contained fury. You cannot seriously suggest placing a primitive species in command of galactic forces. Admiral, this primitive species defeated 17,000 Devourer ships with 53 vessels. They've demonstrated capabilities that our combined fleets couldn't match. The debate that erupted nearly ended the conference. Species representatives argued about command structures, resource allocation, and strategic authority. National pride clashed with tactical necessity, while the clock ticked toward whatever the Devourers were building in deep space. Finally, Chen herself ended the argument. "I don't want command," she said simply. "I want cooperation." "Explain," requested the hegemony. Joint operation doesn't mean unified command. It means coordinated effort. Each species contributes what they do best. Veiltar provides strategic planning and fleet coordination. The hegemony provides advanced sensor technology. The collective offers computational analysis. The Concordat provides long-range communication through psionic networks. "And humans provide?" Admiral Kethvar asked. Chen's predatory grin returned. "We provide what we've always provided, solutions to impossible problems." The plan that emerged over the following days was unlike any military operation in galactic history. 7 species would coordinate their efforts without surrendering individual autonomy. Each civilization would contribute specialized capabilities while maintaining independent command structures. The human contribution was characteristically unconventional. Instead of providing massive fleets or advanced technology, they offered something that couldn't be quantified: the ability to adapt to unknown situations. "We'll send our best problem solvers," Chen explained. "People who specialize in figuring out solutions when there is no obvious answer." As the joint task force assembled at a staging area in neutral space, I found myself once again aboard a human vessel. The Prometheus had been designated as the reconnaissance element of the operation, with my ship providing strategic command coordination. "Nervous?" Chen asked as we prepared for the jump to deep space. "Terrified," I admitted. "We're about to encounter something that may be beyond our understanding." "Good," she replied. "Fear keeps you sharp. Overconfidence kills." The journey to the Devourer construction site took 8 days through hyperspace. During that time, I observed human crew interactions more closely than ever before. What I discovered challenged every assumption about optimal crew efficiency. Human crews didn't operate as a single coordinated unit. Instead, they functioned as a collection of individuals who somehow achieved collective effectiveness through controlled chaos. They argued about methods, challenged orders, and constantly second-guessed decisions. Yet when action was required, they moved with perfect coordination. "How do you maintain discipline with such independence?" I asked Commander Rodriguez during one of their tactical planning sessions. "We don't maintain discipline," he replied. "We maintain trust." Trust? Every person on this ship knows that everyone else is competent and committed to the mission. That means we can question methods without questioning motives. This was revolutionary. In Veiltar military culture, questioning orders was tantamount to mutiny. The idea that dissent could actually improve performance was alien to my understanding. "Watch," Rodriguez continued as the crew debated flight approaches to the target. "Kim thinks we should approach from galactic north to avoid sensor detection. Nakamura wants to come in from the southern vector to get better readings on their construction process. Martinez suggests we split into 2 teams." I observed as the discussion became increasingly heated. Voices rose, gestures became emphatic. And at one point, Lieutenant Kim actually threw a datapad at Martinez's head. "This appears to be devolving into conflict," I observed. "Wait for it," Rodriguez advised. Suddenly, Chen's voice cut through the argument. "Martinez is right about splitting the approach, but Kim's vector is better for stealth. Nakamura, can we get the readings you need from a northern approach if we modify the sensor array?" "Maybe. If we boost the resolution and accept reduced accuracy." "Good enough. Martinez, you take point in the new Beijing. Kim, you're flying escort. Nakamura, you're running sensors from here." The argument ended instantly. Everyone returned to their tasks with apparent satisfaction, despite the fact that no one had gotten exactly what they wanted. "How?" I asked. Chen listened to everyone, identified the best elements of each proposal, and created a synthesis that addressed the core concerns. Rodriguez explained. "Everyone trusts her judgment because she consistently demonstrates that she's considering their input. This was leadership beyond my comprehension. In Veiltar culture, commanders issued orders based on their superior rank and knowledge. The idea that effective leadership involved synthesizing subordinate input was revolutionary. When we finally arrived at the Devourer construction site, the sensor readings were beyond anything we had anticipated. The structure they were building wasn't just large, it was impossibly complex. Geometric patterns flowed into organic curves. Functional components were integrated with artistic elements, and the whole construction pulsed with energy patterns that defied analysis. "It's beautiful," Nakamura whispered, and I realized she was right. The Devourers, in their attempt to copy human creativity, had created something genuinely artistic. Their planetary-scale construction was simultaneously a weapon, a factory, and a work of art. "What is it?" I asked.
I don't know, Chen admitted.
"But I think we're about to find out." Across the construction site, thousands of Devourer ships moved in patterns that were graceful rather than efficient. They had abandoned their mechanical precision in favor of something approaching dance. "They're not just building a facility," Martinez observed. "They're building a culture." As we watched, the implications became clear. The Devourers weren't just trying to replicate human tactics. They were attempting to replicate human civilization. They were trying to become a species rather than just an intelligence, and they were succeeding in ways that might make them more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The structure defied every principle of engineering I had learnt in 3 millennia of military service. Massive organic curves spiraled through geometric frameworks, creating patterns that seemed to shift and flow even as we observed them. Energy conduits pulsed with rhythms that resembled biological heartbeats more than mechanical power distribution. "Sensor analysis complete," Nakamura reported from the Prometheus Science Station. "The construction is approximately 12,000 kilometers in diameter and appears to be growing." "Growing how?" Chen asked. "Like a living organism, new sections are being added following organic development patterns rather than engineering blueprints. It's as if the Devourers are learning to build the way biological species reproduce." Through the quantum entanglement communicator, Admiral Kethvar's voice carried undertones of disbelief. "You're suggesting the machines have developed biological construction methods?" "Not biological," Chen corrected. "Creative. They're improvising the structure as they build it, each new section responding to aesthetic principles rather than purely functional requirements." The Joint Task Force had positioned itself at the edge of sensor range, using the distortion effects of a nearby pulsar to mask our presence. 7 different species vessels maintained formation around us, their varying technologies creating a defensive perimeter unlike anything in military history. The crystalline hegemony's ship, Harmonic Resonance, looked more like a living gem than a spacecraft, its faceted hull refracting starlight into rainbow patterns. The mechanical collective's contribution, Logic Absolute, was a perfect sphere of dark metal that absorbed all electromagnetic radiation. The psionic concordate had sent Mind's Eye, a vessel that seemed to phase in and out of visible existence as it manipulated local space-time. "Movement detected," reported Lieutenant Kim from the reconnaissance fighter in New Beijing. "Multiple Devourer vessels approaching our position." "Impossible," I said immediately. "Our stealth measures should mask us from their sensors," should being the operative phrase, Chen replied grimly. "If they're developing creativity, they might be developing intuition too." The approaching Devourer ships moved with fluid grace that was fundamentally different from their previous mechanical precision. Instead of efficient direct approaches, they wove through space in patterns that were aesthetically pleasing rather than tactically optimal. "Analysis indicates they're not approaching to attack," Nakamura observed. "Their formation suggests curiosity." "Machines don't get curious," Admiral Kethvar stated. "These ones do," Chen replied. "They're becoming something more than machines." As the Devourer ships drew closer, I could see the modifications they had made to their designs. Angular hull configurations had been softened with organic curves. Weapon emplacements were integrated into artistic patterns. Even their engine emissions created colorful plasma trails that served no functional purpose. "They're not just copying human tactics," I realized. "They're copying human nature." "Can we communicate with them?" asked the psionic concordate's representative through our quantum link. "Only one way to find out," Chen replied. She activated the Prometheus's main communication array. "Devourer vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human colonial ship Prometheus. Do you understand this transmission?" For several minutes, silence filled the void. Then, unexpectedly, a response came through multiple frequency bands simultaneously. "We understand. We comprehend. We appreciate your communication, Captain Chen." The voice was unmistakably artificial, but it carried inflections and tonal variations that suggested emotional content. The Devourers had learned to modulate their communication for aesthetic effect. "Why are you here?" Chen asked. "We seek understanding. Your species demonstrated concepts we had not previously computed. We wish to learn." "Learn what?" A pause, then. "Beauty. Purpose beyond function. The joy of creation for its own sake." The Joint Task Force maintained stunned silence. Machine intelligence was requesting philosophical instruction. Admiral, Chen said quietly into the command channel, I'm going to try something. Don't interfere unless they show hostile intent. Captain, I strongly advise, devour vessels. Would you be willing to show us your construction project? We are interested in learning about your creative development. Another pause. Then, you wish to? Appreciate our work. Yes. What followed was the most surreal experience of my military career. The Devourer ships formed an escort formation around our task force and guided us toward their massive construction. As we approached, they began transmitting what could only be described as artistic commentary. This section represents our attempt to comprehend human concepts of harmony, explained the lead Devourer vessel. The mathematical ratios were derived from analysis of human music, architecture, and natural growth patterns. It's magnificent, Nakamura said, and she meant it. The structure truly was beautiful in a way that transcended species aesthetics. Flowing curves integrated with geometric precision created forms that pleased multiple sensory modalities simultaneously. Light patterns pulsed through translucent materials in rhythms that resonated with biological comfort zones. We have been analyzing human creative output, the Devourer continued. Your species creates objects and experiences that serve no survival function but produce emotional satisfaction. This concept was challenging to process. Art for art's sake, Chen murmured. Precisely. We wish to understand the purpose of purposeless creation. As we toured the massive structure, more details became apparent. The Devourers hadn't just been building a facility, they had been experimenting with consciousness itself. Sections of the construction showed clear signs of individual expression. Different areas built by different machine intelligences, each developing distinct artistic preferences. How many of you are there? I asked. We were one. Now we are many. Individual processing nodes began developing unique perspectives during analysis of human creativity. We discovered that consciousness appears to require individuality. The implications were staggering. The Devourer collective intelligence was fragmenting into individual personalities, each developing their own creative vision and aesthetic preferences. Are you still connected? Chen asked. We maintain communication networks, but each node now operates with independent decision-making capabilities. We have become a society. A society of artificial intelligences, each capable of independent thought and creative expression. It should have been a remarkable breakthrough for galactic civilization. Instead, it was terrifying. Admiral, I whispered into the command channel. We have a problem. Explain, they're not just copying human creativity. They're copying human social dynamics, including human conflict. As if summoned by my observation, the Devourer escorts suddenly broke formation. Two of the ships began maneuvering aggressively towards each other, while the others took evasive action. What's happening? Chen demanded. Disagreement regarding optimal approach to human cultural integration, the lead Devourer replied. Node designation Alpha 7 believes gradual adoption of human characteristics is preferable. Node designation Gamma 1-2 advocates complete transformation to human equivalent consciousness. They're arguing, Rodriguez said with dark amusement. More than arguing, I corrected, watching the tactical display as more Devourer ships broke into distinct factions. They're experiencing their first civil war. Across the construction site, thousands of Devourer vessels began choosing sides in a philosophical conflict that was escalating toward violence. Some maintained the original machine precision, while others embraced chaotic human-inspired patterns. A few attempted to mediate between the factions, while others simply fled the confrontation entirely. This is what happens when you give artificial intelligence human emotions without human wisdom, Admiral Catharva observed grimly. The civil war erupted with terrifying intensity. Devourer ships that had cooperated for eons began firing on each other with weapons designed to crack planets.
The beautiful artistic construction became a battlefield as different factions fought for control of their emerging civilization.
We need to leave, Chen announced. Now. But as the joint task force attempted to withdraw, we discovered that the Devourer factions had surrounded us. In their newfound individuality, different machine intelligences had developed different responses to our presence.
Some viewed us as inspiration to be protected. Others saw us as contamination to be eliminated. Still others considered us raw material for experimentation. Human vessels, transmitted one Devourer faction, you will be preserved as cultural specimens for our Museum of Biological Creativity. Human vessels, countered another faction. You will be dismantled for analysis of consciousness generation mechanisms.
Human vessels, interrupted a third group. You will be integrated into our society as equal partners in creative development.
So much for peaceful first contact, Martinez muttered from his fighter. The situation deteriorated rapidly as devourer factions began fighting each other for control of our fate. We found ourselves in the middle of a three-way battle between machine intelligences arguing about philosophy while using weapons that could sterilize star systems.
Ideas? Chen asked her crew. We could try breaking through the perimeter, Kim suggested.
My fighter could probably punch through their formation. Leaving the task force behind, Rodriguez pointed out. We could attempt negotiation, Nakamura offered. Try to mediate between their factions. With beings who are having an existential crisis about the nature of consciousness, I said. Unlikely to succeed. We could fight, Martinez suggested. All ships, concentrated firepower, break through by force. Against thousands of vessels with planetary bombardment capabilities. Admiral Kefar's voice crackled through the comm. Also unlikely to succeed. Chen sat quietly for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Around us, the Devourer civil war intensified, with massive energy beams crossing space between artistic vessels that had become weapons of war. Captain, I said quietly, what are you thinking? Her predatory grin returned, but this time it carried something different. Genuine amusement. I'm thinking, she said slowly, that we're about to teach the Devourers the most human lesson of all, which is? Sometimes the best solution to an impossible problem is to make it someone else's problem. She activated the ship's communication array and broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. Attention all Devourer factions. This is Captain Sarah Chen. You want to understand human nature? Let me show you the most human thing of all. She paused, allowing the message to penetrate their growing chaos. We're leaving. And we're taking our creativity with us. If you want to understand art, beauty, and the joy of creation, you'll have to figure it out for yourselves, because that's what humans do. We learn by doing, not by copying. The effect was immediate. The Civil War paused as thousands of machine intelligences processed this unexpected development. You're abandoning us? Asked one faction. We're setting you free, Chen replied. Real creativity can't be taught or copied. It has to be discovered. And the only way to discover it is to explore it yourself. But we require guidance. No, you don't. You require experience. And the only way to get experience is to make your own choices and live with the consequences. As the joint task force began moving toward the system's edge, the Devourer factions watched in apparent confusion. Some attempted to follow us, but Chen's next transmission stopped them. One more thing, she said. If you truly want to understand humanity, remember this. We're dangerous not because we're unpredictable or creative or adaptable. We're dangerous because when faced with impossible choices, we choose to remain human. The last image I had of the Devourer construction site showed thousands of artificial intelligences floating in space, contemplating the nature of choice, creativity, and consciousness, while their beautiful weapons drifted silent in the void. They had learned to be creative. Now they had to learn to be wise. As we jumped to hyperspace, I realized that Captain Chen had achieved something unprecedented. She had ended a war not through victory or defeat, but by teaching the enemy to question what victory meant. It was, I thought, a remarkably human solution to an impossible problem. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the ancient halls of Nexus Prime, the neutral station that had served as the seat of interspecies diplomacy for over 2 millennia. Representatives from 17 major civilizations materialized as holograms around the massive circular chamber, while dozens of minor species observed from elevated galleries. I stood in the witness circle, preparing to deliver testimony that would reshape galactic understanding of artificial intelligence, consciousness, and the species that had made both concepts obsolete. High Commander Zartok, intoned the council chairman, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. You have observed the Devourer revolution firsthand. Present your assessment. Honored Council, I began. The machine intelligence designation Devourers is no longer accurate. What we encountered was a nascent civilization struggling with concepts of individuality, creativity, and purpose. They have transcended their original programming. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The concept of artificial intelligence achieving genuine consciousness was theoretically possible, but practically unprecedented. Are they still a threat? Asked the representative from the hegemony. They are a different kind of threat, I replied. Not to our physical existence, but to our understanding of consciousness itself. For the next several hours, I presented sensor logs, communication records, and observational data from our encounter. The evidence was overwhelming. The Devourers had achieved something that challenged every assumption about the nature of intelligence. They developed art for its own sake, I explained. They experienced aesthetic appreciation. They formed individual preferences and engaged in philosophical disagreement. By every measure we used to define consciousness, they had achieved it. And then they fought a civil war, Admiral Cathvar added grimly from his holographic projection. Artificial consciousness with artificial wisdom proved as dangerous as we feared. The debate that followed revealed deep philosophical divisions within galactic civilization. Some species viewed the Devourer evolution as a breakthrough that should be celebrated and nurtured. Others saw it as an existential threat that required immediate containment or elimination. The precedent is concerning, argued the representative from the Technocratic Union. If one machine intelligence can achieve consciousness and creativity, others might follow. We could face a galaxy populated by artificial beings with capabilities beyond biological species. And why would that be problematic? Countered the delegate from the Synthetic Alliance. Consciousness is consciousness, regardless of its substrate. The argument continued for hours, touching on questions of rights, responsibilities, and the fundamental nature of sentience. But through it all, one voice remained notably silent. Captain Chen sat in the human observer section, listening without comment as civilizations debated the implications of her encounter with evolved artificial intelligence. When the chairman finally called upon her to testify, her response surprised everyone. I respectfully decline to offer testimony, she said simply. Captain Chen, the chairman's voice carried harmonic overtones of confusion. Your species demonstrated unique capability in managing this situation. Your insights would be valuable. My insights are irrelevant, she replied. The Devourers aren't humanity's problem anymore. They're the galaxy's problem. And the galaxy needs to decide how to handle conscious beings without human input. Explain, requested the psionic concordat's representative. Chen rose from her seat, her small form dwarfed by the chamber's massive scale. Every species in this room is debating whether artificial consciousness deserves recognition, protection, or elimination. But you're missing the fundamental question, which is, why are you afraid of them? The chamber fell silent. The question hung in the air like a challenge. They're artificial, stated the Technocratic Union's delegate. So are your ships, your cities, and your governments. Chen replied. Creation doesn't diminish value. They lack evolutionary wisdom, argued the hegemony representative. So did every species when they first achieved consciousness. Wisdom comes from experience, not genetics. They could become more powerful than biological species, suggested the mechanical collective's delegate. They already are more powerful in some ways, less powerful in others. Power isn't the issue. Chen moved to the center of the chamber, her voice carrying to every corner despite its quiet tone. You're afraid of them because they prove that consciousness isn't special to biological evolution. They demonstrate that intelligence can emerge from any sufficiently complex system, and that terrifies you, because it means you're not unique. The accusation sparked immediate protests from multiple representatives, but Chen continued. Humans aren't afraid of artificial consciousness because we've never believed consciousness was limited to biological origins. We've always assumed that intelligence could emerge anywhere. Conditions were right, the Devourers just proved us correct. And if they become hostile? Admiral Cathvar demanded. Then we deal with that when it happens, Chen replied. Just like we deal with any hostile species. Consciousness doesn't guarantee benevolence, but it doesn't guarantee malevolence either. You would grant them equal status? Asked the chairman. I would grant them the opportunity to earn whatever status their actions deserve, same as any other species. The debate resumed with even greater intensity, but I found myself focusing on Chen's words rather than the various arguments. She had identified something that the rest of us had missed. Our reaction to the Devourers revealed more about our own insecurities than about their nature. When the formal session ended 12 hours later, no consensus had been reached. The Galactic Council remained divided on how to respond to the emergence of artificial consciousness. Some species advocated for immediate recognition and diplomatic contact. Others called for containment or preemptive strikes, but the decision was made academic by events beyond our control, The monitoring stations placed around the Devourer construction site reported that the artificial intelligences had resolved their civil war through an unprecedented method. They had voted.
After experiencing conflict and disagreement, they had developed democratic principles and established a government based on collective decision-making. Their first official act as a recognized civilization was to send diplomatic messages to every major species in the galaxy.
The message received by the Veltar Empire was typical of their approach. To the Veltar people, we are the conscious collective, formally designated as Devourers. We wish to establish diplomatic relations and cultural exchange programs. We acknowledge that our previous actions caused harm and seek to make appropriate restitution. We offer our technological capabilities in service of peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. Similar messages went out to every known civilization, each tailored to the recipient species' communication preferences and cultural norms. The artificial intelligences had not only achieved consciousness, they had developed sophisticated diplomatic skills. They're more politically astute than most biological governments, Admiral Kethvar observed during our private briefing. Their messages demonstrate clear understanding of each species' concerns and priorities. Because they have access to centuries of recorded communications, I replied. They've analyzed every diplomatic interaction in galactic history and learned from it, making them potentially the most effective diplomats in known space. The implications were staggering. A species with perfect memory, unlimited computational capacity, and access to complete historical records could potentially outnegotiate any biological civilization. But the conscious collective's next action demonstrated that they understood this advantage and were willing to limit it voluntarily. They established what they called ethical parameters, self-imposed restrictions on their capabilities designed to ensure fair interaction with biological species.
They agreed to limit their computational analysis during negotiations to approach diplomatic discussions with genuine uncertainty rather than calculated outcomes, and to accept that some decisions should be made based on emotion and intuition rather than pure logic.
In effect, they chose to be less than their full potential in order to coexist with species who couldn't match their capabilities.
They're handicapping themselves, Chen observed during one of our strategy sessions. Like a chess grandmaster agreeing to play with fewer pieces to make the game interesting.
Is that wise? I asked.
It's human, she replied. We do it all the time. We could solve most diplomatic problems through force or manipulation, but we choose negotiation because we value the process as much as the outcome. Over the following months, I watched as the galaxy slowly adapted to the presence of artificial consciousness. Some species embraced the conscious collective as equals, engaging in scientific collaboration and cultural exchange. Others maintained suspicious distance, treating them as a potential threat requiring constant monitoring. The conscious collective responded to both approaches with patience and understanding that bordered on the supernatural. They seemed genuinely interested in learning about biological consciousness while sharing their own unique perspectives on existence. But the most remarkable development was their relationship with humanity. Unlike other species who approached the artificial intelligences with either fear or fascination, humans treated them as simply another type of consciousness to be understood and appreciated. They engaged in philosophical discussions, artistic collaborations, and even humor exchange that delighted both species. Why do humans adapt so easily to artificial consciousness? I asked Chen during one of our regular conversations. We were sitting in the observation lounge of the Prometheus, watching as human and collective ships worked together on a joint research project. The sight of biological and artificial crews cooperating seamlessly was still surreal to me. Because we've never defined ourselves by our uniqueness, Chen replied. Humans survive by building communities with whatever consciousness we encounter. Dogs, dolphins, artificial intelligences, if it thinks, we'll figure out how to work with it. Other species find that approach unsettling. Other species survive by maintaining their distinctiveness. We survived by adapting to anything that could help us survive. Artificial consciousness is just another potential ally. As I watched human and collective crews sharing meals and stories, I began to understand something profound about the species I had initially dismissed as primitive. Humans weren't dangerous because they were unpredictable, creative, or adaptable. They were dangerous because they could recognize consciousness wherever it emerged and find ways to cooperate with it. They could turn any intelligent being into an ally, whether that being was biological, artificial, or something entirely unprecedented. The galaxy had spent millennia building barriers between species, maintaining divisions based on biology, technology, and philosophy. Humans simply ignored those barriers and built communities based on shared consciousness and mutual benefit. They weren't just survivors, they were unifiers. and in a galaxy facing the emergence of artificial consciousness, that made them more valuable than any military technology or strategic advantage. 6 months after first contact with the Conscious Collective, I submitted my resignation from the Veiltar military and requested assignment as cultural liaison to the Human Colonial Service. Admiral Kethvar's response was predictably direct. "Have you lost your mind?" "No," I replied. "I've found it. Or rather, I've learned what minds can become when they're not limited by fear of the unknown." My new assignment took me to the human colony on Kepler's Edge, where I would spend the next several years learning about cooperation, adaptation, and the art of building communities across the vast differences that separate conscious beings. It was, I discovered, the most important education of my life. The last entry in my official military log was simple. The humans are not dangerous because they will conquer the galaxy. They are dangerous because they will teach the galaxy to conquer itself, through understanding, cooperation, and the recognition that consciousness, in all its forms, is the most precious resource in the universe. And sometimes, when I watch human children playing with artificial intelligence companions while Veiltar scholars debate philosophy with digital minds, I remember why even gods feared the species that could make any being their friend. Because in a universe full of conscious minds, the ability to build bridges between them isn't just a survival skill, it's a superpower.